Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Fusion 360 for Glowforge users webinar. I'm your host, Jason Lichtman, and I'll be guiding you through the festivities today. We had a little bit of an issue with our recording earlier, so we are going to re-record everything live. And by re-record live, I just mean that we're going to do a single full recording from start to finish without any edits, just like we had earlier today. But I'm going to try to recreate everything from earlier as closely as I can to what actually happened. All right, so let's look at our agenda today. Just a moment. There we are. So I'm going to be telling you a little bit about myself and why I'm hosting this webinar series. I can no longer poll the audience because temporarily I'm the only one on this webinar. And then I'm going to be telling you the 4 different ways you can import vectors into Fusion 360. And then I'll be telling you about the 3 different ways that I'd export vectors from Fusion 360. And then lastly, we're going to show how to apply a pattern in Illustrator to some geometry that I created here in Fusion 360. That's the agenda for today, and I hope you guys like it. You are going to notice that it is a little different from the original intent. So instead of doing the stacked layer design this week, we're going to be doing that next week instead. And instead of next week, I mean on Wednesday later this week, we're going to be doing that on webinar number 3. And then what was supposed to be in webinar number 3 is going to instead be in webinar number 4. And the content for that is going to be taking a 3D solid model of an object, whether you designed it yourself or you downloaded it from the internet, and slicing it into layers you could then laser cut. I hope you guys are all as excited to see this content as I am to show it to you. Let's begin. All right, cool. So a little bit about me. So the name is Jason Lichtman, and I'm a mechanical engineer by education. I do work at Autodesk, and so the first thing I want to tell you is that this particular webinar series is not endorsed or promoted by Glowforge itself. Rather, I purchased a Glowforge 2 years ago. I've been excited for it to show up for 2 years straight now. And now that my Glowforge is just around the corner, by the way, I did just get a tracking number. It'll be here on Wednesday, so I can't wait to have Thursday and Friday of this week off so I could nerd out in my office and laser cut a bunch of cool stuff. Postings to follow, of course. Nice. And in the meantime, you know, I thought the laser cutter is coming close, and I look at the forums and I see a lot of people are using different programs for 2D design like Inkscape or CorelDRAW and Illustrator. And then on the 3D front, I keep seeing Fusion 360 being mentioned over and over and over again. And I love it, by the way, because my job is at Autodesk to be a technical specialist for Fusion 360, and I get to do pre-sales demonstrations showing customers how they would use Fusion to get the products that they normally design elsewhere designed more quickly and easily in Fusion. And I get to apply all of those same skills to the Glowforge and get to show the Glowforge community how you could design things easier and more quickly in Fusion 360 to then apply to your Glowforge. Right? So like you, I am a Glowforge backer / owner, and I just decided the community needed something like this, so I'm happy to give it. But again, you know, this isn't backed or promoted by Glowforge. That being said, it looks like Dan Shapiro happens to be a fan of the series. He is posting about it as well. Anyway, my background, mechanical engineering. I have my master's and my bachelor's degree in that exact field. And then I spent about a decade working in industry as a mechanical engineer for consumer product design and development. And basically, I love designing consumer products. I like seeing a product, whether it be, you know, a water bottle like this one, and saying, you know, what did they do really great and what didn't they do so great? What could I do better? And also, what tools would be the best for the job to actually design that and then manufacture? And so all of this is being applied today. Let's continue. Okay, so this is where I was supposed to poll the audience. Like I said, I can't do that right now because I'm re-recording this live. And so we're going to jump into the really good stuff. And so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the 4 different ways that you could import vector work. Now, the last webinar we had, we talked about how, or rather I talked about how, using Fusion 360 as your sole tool is not really ideal for laser cutting. It's really a combination of a 3D program like Fusion 360 as well as a 2D program like Illustrator, Inkscape, or CorelDRAW, or whatever else you can find out there that does the same. I happen to choose to use Illustrator for my 2D and Fusion for my 3D, and I'll be showing you the back and forth between those 2 programs. I don't have Corel, I don't have Inkscape, I don't know how either works, you know, in detail, But I hope that whatever you see today in Illustrator is going to apply really well for you, regardless of what 2D program you're using, because the concepts themselves are what hold true. Cool. So in terms of importing, right, let's say you went online and you downloaded an SVG from the internet. You can actually go on Wikipedia these days, and if you go and you search for, let's say, Colorado flag SVG, oh, I forgot to type in the G, there we go. You're going to even find on Wikipedia, you can find SVGs, right? If you click on this image, it's not itself going to be an SVG, even though the name up top does seem to end it with SVG, it's really a PNG for some reason. But if you scroll down, you could actually come in here and it says the size of the PNG preview of the SVG is this. And if you want the original file, you can click on this and that'll be the real SVG. So you could download SVGs all over the place. You could import them into Illustrator, and you can also import them directly into Fusion. And I'll show you how that works right now. Let's open up our Fusion 360. I have a Glowforge logo right here, but we're going to start from scratch and do this again. So I'm going to open up a new design. I'm going to close my data panel, and I'm going to say Insert SVG. So I can choose right now a plane on where I'm going to put this SVG, and basically anywhere that's a flat plane is going to work just fine. It could be any of these three planes that come with Fusion, and you can also choose a face as long as it's planar, which means flat, of a 3D object. That would work no problem. So you pick one of these planes or faces, then it's going to ask you to choose your SVG file, and in this case I'm going to import the Glowforge SVG. Now, one of the things I want you to see here is that I have the options to manipulate this SVG. I can move it left or right on this screen right now using this arrow. And when I grab this arrow, it's only moving left and right. If I grab this one down below, I can actually raise this up or down. And if I grab this square, I can actually move this in either direction at the same time. Excellent. I can also grab this scale and change the size of this particular thing. And I can also flip my image. Sorry for the, by the way, this is a real working office. So we have technical specialists in the background and product specialists like Tyler Beck right over there. And we have our colleagues Wayne Griffenberg and Riley. Where's Riley? There he is hiding in the background. But we'll continue this right now. Hold on just a second. All right, cool. I hope you guys like that the little aside. So back where we were. So we were looking at our SVG that we imported, and we had a bunch of options to be able to flip the image, scale the image, and move it around, all of which are great, right? So let's say it came in backwards for some reason. I could do this flip. I can also do the same thing over here in this right corner. But overall, oh, and I could even change the angle, so that's pretty helpful. And notice when I change, let's say, the angle, it is changing it over here. And so I can come in and change that over there as well. And I'm going to say OK. Once I say OK, you're going to see that the sketch itself is coming in as green lines. Okay, so that means that those entities that created it are fixed in space. Like I can't just drag this and move this right now. I can, if I really want to, I can highlight everything, and then I can unfix. That's hitting this lock button right over here. I can unfix these things. Now everything shows up as blue. And when it's blue, I can actually move it around. Now, granted, in this case, moving it around is really going to mess it up. But I just wanted to let you know that you could do that. And in either case, whether those lines are blue or green, you're going to see that the inside is filled in with this yellow color. And if I highlight over the yellow, you're going to see that the edges of my model turn black. And all that's doing is telling me that I have a closed profile that I can use to create 3D geometry. So if I wanted to extrude, for example, I can come up here under this create and say extrude, pick this shape, and then I can actually pull this into 3D. Perfect. This would work with pretty much any SVG that you'd want to import, no problem at all. And you can pay attention, again, I can come in here and edit that sketch, and I could unfix everything. I'm just repeating some of this again. I can unfix everything and then actually move it around. And so if I need to move this line, I can actually do that. And you're going to see that it is, in this case, warping my image, but I can do that if I need to, right? So also it means that if I wanted to modify this, like I wanted to cut off the top portion, I could draw a new line, and then I could still come in here and trim this, just like so. Now granted, you know, this is the Glowforge logo, and I'm sure I'm violating their branding guidelines right now, but the general idea is simply that you can import an SVG and then also edit it directly here in Fusion. All right, so this is one of my favorite ways to do it, and you just saw it live. Let's try it again differently. So we're going to take another new file. This time we're going to say Insert DXF.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, DXF is another type of vector file that's two-dimensional, and I can come and pick another plane, and I'm going to choose the DXF this time, and it's going to be the same image. This time it's the DXF file type. Now I'm noticing a couple of things that happen differently. Number one, this image came in at a different location than the previous. By the way, both files, even though the types are different, the file itself, the content of what was inside it, was exactly the same image. But you are noticing that the DXF came in a different location. And then also, although I can move this around however I'd like, I don't have all the same manipulators as I did before. So although I can move this left and right, and I can move it up and down, and I can even move it in both directions at once, I don't have the ability to rotate this image. I don't have the ability to scale this image. It is a little bit more limited in what you could do with it. So right off the bat, if you're going to insert an SVG or a DXF, I recommend you insert your SVG. It is going to come in a little bit cleaner, and it's a little bit more usable for you. So try that out. And once you import it again, just like before, I can come in here and I can extrude this into a 3D shape, just like so. Perfect. Cool. So we went over 2 out of the 4 ways that I recommend you import vector work. So let's try the other 2. The first one is going to be taking those same files, and this time we're going to upload them into the Fusion 360 workspace. So I'm going to choose to upload my file, and I'm going to select my file, and I'm going to choose the same DXF we just worked with and the same SVG we just worked with, and we're going to upload those and see what we get. Now, by the way, I'm not saying at any point here that the way Fusion 360 currently deals with certain things is perfect. By no means is it perfect. I do think it's an absolutely incredible tool, but it's important for me to recognize the few areas that I think it doesn't excel in or doesn't do things as well as I'd like, because by knowing those things, you can, of course, work around it, and that to me is really important. By the way, little known fact, we have about 375 software developers here at Autodesk working on Fusion 360 full time. If you didn't hear that right, I'm going to repeat that. 375 software developers making Fusion 360 more and more awesome each and every day. We release a new update about every 6 weeks, and so you're going to see new functionality launched on a very regular basis, which is absolutely amazing. And updating your Fusion 360 application is just as easy as updating an app on your iPhone. In this case, it's even easier. You just open up Fusion 360, and if a new update is available under job status, you'll see somewhere around here telling you that it's updating Fusion, and within just a couple of minutes, it's done. Like that easy. No need, you don't need, the key here really is you don't need an IT department to be able to upgrade your 3D modeling software. It's as simple as opening it, and it just magically updates in the background for you. Cool. Now, I was stalling this whole time so that everything could finish uploading, and now that it has, let's take a look at what we got. So the first thing I'm going to look at is this file right here, and it looks like this one is the SVG that we uploaded, and this one on the left is the DXF that we uploaded. Let's go take a look at the SVG first and see what we get. Notice when I open it, it's actually opening on our web browser. And basically what it comes down to is that although Fusion 360 definitely understands what an SVG is, it's not an acceptable upload type in terms of importing data from our data panel. And so in this particular case, it's not even showing me what this thing is supposed to look like. And it's certainly not opening this in Fusion in a way that I could actually use it. So in my opinion, uploading an SVG this way, useless. I wouldn't do it at all. I don't see any benefit of it whatsoever. In short, don't upload SVGs into the data panel. However, keep in mind that you can also insert your SVG over here, and that's what we did earlier. Excellent. So I'm going to delete this file because clearly we're not going to use it. And while we're over here, let's open up the DXF. This time it is going to open in Fusion 360 itself, and it is coming with entire sketch entities that I can select, and everything is looking really good. This is exactly what I'd expect. I have all blue lines, which means I can still edit it, right? You can see here I'm moving things around I probably shouldn't have. So I'm going to undo there. And I'm seeing the yellow on the inside, which means that I could turn this into a 3D thing whenever I'm ready, right? Just like this. We did that earlier today. And it also means that I could use this, right? So overall, I would say that uploading a DXF is actually perfectly reasonable, right? So let's look at our 4 ways, and let's summarize what's a good choice, in my opinion, and what's not the best choice, in my opinion. Inserting the SVG came in no problem and allowed us to be able to rotate, scale, reposition, and everything. And it also came in with the actual entities. So for me, this one is my #1 choice. I love this, right? That's excellent. Option number 2 was the insert of DXF. It also came in with pretty good geometry, but it didn't give me the full ability to rotate or scale. So between the two, I would say right off the bat that I would rather insert an SVG than insert a DXF. Then in terms of uploading the SVG was pretty useless, so I don't recommend that one at all. And uploading the DXF was pretty helpful. Actually, I don't see any problem with that at all. But of the 4 options, my personal favorite is still going to be insert SVG into Fusion. And so I recommend you give that a shot. And again, it doesn't matter if the SVG comes from Illustrator, Inkscape, Corel Draw, or even from the internet from who knows what program created it. The one thing to keep in mind is that if the SVG you bring in is not a closed profile, you are going to have trouble creating 3D geometry with it. So for example, if when I brought this thing in, it's missing, let's say this line right over here, notice what this looks like right now, right? I still have all those same blue lines. By the way, I could turn them green by highlighting everything. Actually, we need to edit the sketch first. Let's go and edit the sketch. I could highlight everything and lock it, and so now everything is green. All it means now is I can't move this in space, but it's still not closed, and because it's not closed, I'm a little bit more limited in what I could do with this. And so I would highly recommend making sure that any SVGs you bring into Fusion come in already closed. And if you'd like to modify them, you can modify them in another program like Inkscape, Corel, or Illustrator, or you could even bring it in into Fusion and then close it yourself. In this particular case, it's a little obvious what's missing, and so I could come in here and add a line. I hit the letter L on my keyboard for a shortcut, and as soon as I bridge that gap, now you can see that everything turned with the yellow shading in the inside. It's a closed profile now, and I could use it for 3D work again. All right, so that summarizes all the different ways you can import a vector into Fusion to use it. Next, let's go over how you would export a vector from Fusion into whatever program you like. I'm going to show Illustrator for the most part, but again, it really doesn't matter what we're talking about here. So there are 3 ways I'm going to show you. The first way is, in my opinion, not a great way to do it, but it's possible. So I'm going to show it to you anyway, and let you decide for yourself if you like doing it this way or not. But I'll tell you right off the bat, I don't recommend this method. I think it's a little bit complicated unnecessarily, and let's just go and make it happen. So I'm going to come in here, and let's say I have 3D geometry like this closet divider that we worked on last week. Okay, I'm ready to send this to Illustrator maybe to add patterns to it, right? Because I could just cut this out and it would be fine, but that's not going to be awesome. Right? We have too many people in the Glowforge community that are just way too good at what they do. We can't just put stuff on the internet. We got to put awesome stuff out there. So let's go and send this to Illustrator, and we're going to do it the first way. The first way is using Fusion 360's CAM functionality. Now, we talked last week about how Fusion 360 is a CAD and CAM solution in one. So let me just go over that again. CAD is computer-aided design. CAM is computer-aided manufacturing. So just so you get an idea of what we're talking about here, let's open up a sample part. This is not going to be a laser cut part, but this should be perfect for what we're talking about. Let's say you design some sort of metal fixture or, yeah, a metal fixture, and we want to CNC machine this, right, in a standard router table or CNC machine. In Fusion 360, you can actually come in here and create the tool paths that you would need to actually go and manufacture this. And you can actually simulate that as well. So if I go to simulate and I hit play, you can actually see what's actually happening here is right now we have a face mill cutting the top off of this part. Then it comes in and does an adaptive clearing. Basically, it gets rid of a whole lot of material you don't need. And then it spirals down, gets rid of some pockets. It does all this really fancy stuff. And when it's done, I can save what's called an NC file or a G-code file to a USB stick and put this in the CNC machine and actually run this, right? So this is pretty high-end simulation capabilities, And you can use that same capability on the laser cutting side, but in my opinion, it's a little bit overkill and isn't really necessary for what we're doing with the Glowforge. And the reason primarily is because a lot of the CNC machines are for the most part open source, meaning you write the G code in some program and you load the G code, and it doesn't matter who wrote the G code, the CNC machine, as long as the G code is correct, will read it and then actually run the machine properly. For laser cutters, in some cases that's true, right? And but not all, right? There are plenty of laser cutters out there that use a different method. So for example, Epilogue Laser, they use a printer driver, and so from Inkscape or from Corel or from Illustrator, I literally would say file print, and it sends the file straight to our laser cutter. In Fusion 360, in Glowforge, it works a little different. Glowforge wants you to use their app, their web app, or web interface to actually be able to load all your SVGs and control the intensity of the laser, like, you know, what the power is, what the speed is, the order of operations, all of that stuff is controlled on the Glowforge end. So trying to control it here in Fusion is a little overkill, but it can be done. So I'm going to show you how to do it anyway. So let's go and take a look and see what we got. So I have a closet divider, and I go into the CAM environment, and I did that a little quickly, so let's do that again. I go under this drop-down, and I choose CAM, and you can see this little pop-up telling you what it is. So I come into CAM, and the first thing I need to do is create a setup. A setup is normally intended for CNC machining, right? It's the block of material that you're going to start with that you machine away until you end up with what you're going to end up with. So I'm going to go and create a new setup, and it automatically knows that the smallest volume that can have this particular closet divider is this yellow thing that you can see on my screen. And it's looking pretty good. I don't have any problem with that. I might actually go to the stock size area, and you see how it says here stock offset? Right now it's adding a millimeter extra of stock on the top and the bottom and the left and the right, and I'm going to come in here and say I want no additional stock. Perfect. So now it really is the smallest block that'll fit this closet divider. Then I'm going to go back to this setup area, and I'm going to choose the model orientation. Now this is a little confusing, but it's really important to get this right, because if you don't get this right, the SVGs that you're going to output from here are going to come into the Glowforge interface, either upside down or backwards, or mirrored incorrectly, something weird like that. So I've done a bunch of testing, and I have the answer for you, so we'll just go over the answer. First, we're going to change the operation type to cutting, right? That's going to be for water jet, laser, or plasma. Then I'm going to choose for the orientation to select my own Z and X axis. And right now it's previewing that Z is up, Y is, actually let me rephrase that. If I look at this from the front view, Z is towards me on my screen. Y is up and X is to the right. So what I actually want in this case is I want Z to be into the screen, I want Y to be down, and I still want X to be to the right. So we're kind of correct, but not really. So let's try this again. For the Z, I'm going to pick the front face of my part, and then I'm going to say flip. And notice right now the blue is now facing towards the screen. That's exactly what I wanted. The Y is facing down, and the X is facing to the right. So this is actually perfect. The only thing I want to do now is I want to move the stock point. That's what we call it right over here, which is this origin. We want to move it to a different location. So I'm going to pick box point, and I'm going to pick this corner right over there. Nice. Now you might be wondering to yourself, why am I picking that corner? So I'm picking that corner because if I look at the Glowforge bed, in the top left corner of the bed, that's where Glowforge considers 0, 0. And so we're going to have the same thing right here. Perfect. And I'm going to say OK. And again, you can see this preview. This Y is facing down, X is to the right, and Z is towards the screen. And so now everything is looking really good. Now I'm going to have to go and create a cutting operation for the laser cutter. This is the part that's actually going to go to the Glowforge app or to Illustrator. And I'm going to say I want to do a cutting operation. And now it's going to ask me a couple of things. It's going to ask me what am I going to cut with and what do I want to cut. So let's start off with what we're going to cut with. I'm going to select a tool. And I already have a folder here called laser. Let's pretend I didn't. So I'm going to delete that and we're going to start from scratch. So now I'm going to go and say in my local drive, I want to create a new folder for tools. And I'm going to right click here and say new tool library, and I'm going to call it Glowforge. There we go. Then I'm going to go and create a new cutter. That's right over here. You can see a little picture of a laser. We're going to create a new tool for water jet laser and or plasma cutting. And then I'm going to choose the kerf width. And you know what it comes down to here is that none of this really matters, because anything that comes from Fusion 360 at this point is going to have to go to the Glowforge app, and it's going to you're going to have to work with this there. And so for now, I'm just going to say OK, cool. And then I'm going to choose to use that particular cutter. And there we go. Now, even though I selected my coordinate system correctly, I am going to note that the laser cutter, for whatever reason, thinks that the laser head is from below. And I don't love that it doesn't visualize the way I'd like for it to visualize, but I'll tell you right now, if this is what you see on your screen, this is going to be correct for your Glowforge. This might not be true for a water jet cutter or a laser made by someone else, but for your Glowforge, this is going to be how you preview it. And so we're going to continue. Next, I'm going to go into geometry to cut, and I'm going to select what I actually want to send. And so when I hover over this edge, I'm going to do it from a different view. You can see that it actually hovers and selects the different edges. And this is exactly what I want. And when I click on it, it's going to show in blue, and that's preview in gray. Now, before I can hit OK, there is one additional setting that you have to change. And if you don't change it for whatever reason, it will fail. So I want you to go under the passes section, and I want you to change the compensation type to in computer. In truth, I have absolutely no idea what any of this stands for. I'm sure, I should look it up and figure it out. But I can tell you right now that if you don't set this to in computer, your output, your export isn't going to work. So for now, just make sure to set to in computer. And I'm going to say OK. And now what it did was it created a profile for this laser cutting operation. And when I right-click and say simulate, you can actually see, in theory, what the laser cutter is going to do. The laser is going to go around here and follow this and actually create my path. Excellent. Now, it turns out, I'm actually seeing this visually, that what I'm doing right now is I made a mistake, is what it comes down to. If I go back to my tool library, we're going to go and edit this particular part, this feature, and I go into my tool. I'm going to go back down to this laser here where I have the Glowforge, and I'm going to right-click on this and I'm going to edit it. And what it turns out is that the kerf width does matter. I was wrong earlier. The kerf width does matter. If you don't set this to, I believe, 0, what you're going to end up with, let's see, 0.1. And I say OK, and everything is going to regenerate. Now you see that this blue line much more closely matches what it's supposed to. And in fact, I would say I still don't love this because it really doesn't match the true outer edge. Let's see if we can fix that. I'm going to say Edit, select the tool. I'm going to go back here under Glowforge, and I'm going to edit this. Point. I really just wanted to say 0. See if I have any other options. Nothing. All right, so the reality is, like, if I wanted to output the SVG without any kerf already compensated for, apparently I can't do that here. And so this is just going to be another reason why I really don't like this method. And the other methods are going to be a lot easier for you. I'm only starting with this one so that you feel like you've earned the much better way that you're going to see me do it in a moment. But let's continue for a second. So once I have everything set up the way I wanted it to, I would go to post-process right here, and then I have to add I have to choose the Glowforge as my post-processor. Now I have here, well actually, take a step back. You're probably wondering to yourself, what on earth is a post-processor? So I have to explain something real quick. Basically, a CNC machine, and by the way, the same is true with 3D printers, right? So it's no different. A CNC machine or a 3D printer, they take this G code that tells them, move the head up this amount, move it left this amount, move it right this amount, turn on the heater for the 3D printer, or spin the spindle on the CNC machine. And each machine is a little different, and basically they understand the code slightly different. So each machine, or at least each brand, typically has what we call a post-processor, which translates the generic G code into a G code that's specific to the machine. And we do have a post-processor for a variety of different CNC machines that are out there. And we even have one for the Glowforge. So if you don't have Glowforge listed right there, I want you to go to this area here that says search for posts in our library. You could type in Glow for Glowforge. Download this file. And then once you download it, I want you to find your download folder. Hold on. There we are. We're going to find our downloads folder, which is right here. I'm going to highlight my file, and I'm going to right-click and say Cut. Then I'm going to go into Fusion 360. And I'm going to choose this little icon right here, which opens the folder where all the posts are. And I can paste Control V, and I could replace the file in the destination with this Glowforge post processor. And I'm going to say Cancel now. Now, believe it or not, the first time you do that, you have to hit cancel and then go back to post process. And now when you choose Glowforge and hit post, it's going to create an SVG file wherever location you'd like. So I could put this in laser cutting, and it's going to be 1001.svg. Now, I want to close the loop with you and actually show you what this is actually going to look like. So I'm going to close this thing. Let's see, that's actually showing me the post. And I'm going to open up our Glowforge web interface, and we're going to upload that particular file and see what we got. So that was 1001.svg. It's rendering in the Glowforge app right now. And let's see what we have. There we are. So I have the exact shape like I saw before, but notice that it doesn't do the best job at interpreting what I'm doing. It thinks that instead of this being a single closed path, it interpreted this as two different ways. So yet another reason that I don't happen to really like this particular method of getting your files to the Glowforge app, but it is possible, right? And I could set each of these to cut, and in theory, it's going to cut no problem. But what I'd really prefer is that this is one operation, because this is one closed vector for me to actually follow. I would prefer this to be one operation. So let's go back and show you a couple other options, because again, I really don't like that one. The second way we're going to show today is the export or save as DXF. Okay, so I'm going to come in here under sketches, and I see this sketch, and I'm going to show it for a second and hide the 3D. And this is the exact sketch that I used, line for line, to make the 3D shape. Right? There's no curve adjustment here. There's no nothing. This is the exact shape. And so let's go and take this thing and send it to the Glowforge a different way. So I'm going to go and right-click on the sketch and say Save as DXF. I'm going to put it in this laser cutting folder, and I'm going to call it closetdivider1.dxf. Perfect. Now, I'm going to go back into the Glowforge web app. Let's delete this other thing because we don't need it anymore. Perfect. And we're going to upload, and we're going to look for that exact file. And one of the things you're not going to find right here is that file. And the reason is because right now, and I really hope Glowforge fixes it, please, is right now you cannot upload a DXF into the Glowforge web interface. You can only upload SVGs. So right now, if I go in and try to upload the DXF, I can't see it at all. And so I'm going to go and cancel it and then tell you, well, ask you. No.
So I guess the first...
I'm going to just say it out loud what I'm thinking. You're probably thinking to yourself that if you can't upload the DXF, what's the benefit of saving as a DXF? Well, the reality is that I can take any Illustrator file, even if it came as an SVG, and open it in Illustrator and save it as a DXF. By the way, I should have mentioned this way earlier when we were talking about inserting a DXF into Fusion. But if you go into something like Illustrator, and I open up an SVG, and it could be any SVG I want. Let's say it's this Glowforge logo right here. I can take this thing, and if I can scale it and do any. Let's try scaling it again. I can scale it to any size I want. But when I'm ready to make this a DXF, all I have to do is say File, Export as, and then I choose a file name, and this is going to be called Glowforge logo. R5 or whatever this is supposed to be, and I could choose to, instead of saving it as an SVG, into a DXF. Perfect. And say OK. So that's how I would take an SVG in Illustrator and save it as a DXF. The opposite is also perfectly true. So I took from Fusion, I made a DXF, right? I'm going to then open, where's my folder? There it is. I'm going to go into my laser cutting folder, and I made closetdivider01.dxf, and I'm going to open that in Illustrator. Now, scale is important here. If you get the scale wrong, it's going to show up in the wrong scale. I can't be more blunt than that. In this case, I created my file in millimeters because metric is awesome and imperial is not. And I'd encourage you to try metric whenever possible. I think you might find that it's way better. Wayne, would you agree metric is the way to go?
Yes.
But metric is the way to go. We have it from at least 2 people here in the Autodesk office. And so if you want to import your DXF, let's get the units right. I am going to choose millimeters, and then I'm going to fix this. I'm going to say 1 unit in my file that I'm importing is equal to 1 millimeter. Right? Perfect. And I'm going to scale this 100%, meaning I'm not going to scale it. Right? It's going to come in 1-to-1, or net size, or 100% size, whatever you want to call it. And I'm going to say OK, and now I'm going to come in with my DXF. Now, I want to go back into, I'm going to make this smaller slightly, and I'm going to zoom a little like this. I want to do a side-by-side comparison with what I had in Fusion. So let's go and edit this sketch, and let's make this smaller. There we go. So one of the things I want you to note is that in Fusion, I had this dotted line as my center line. And in Illustrator, when I import the DXF, it comes in with that line being solid.
Cool.
Right? Because in Illustrator, it doesn't know that this line, even though it was dotted in Fusion, it doesn't know that it's really a center line, and we're not going to use it for anything else. And so it shows up as a full line. So the first thing I'm going to do is basically take this thing, and I have a couple of choices. I could either get rid of the stroke, so now you don't see it, or more realistically, I can just go and delete it. You know, whatever works for you. And now I have this thing, and if I just wanted to go straight to the Glowforge, you know, don't make any changes to this, no nothing, I'm going to say File, Save As, and I could choose an SVG here, and this time I'm going to choose Closet Divider 02 as .svg and say OK. Perfect. And I'm going to say OK over here, and now created the file. Let's go to the Glowforge web app and see what we get. If I recall correctly, it's Closet Divider Rev 2 that we're going to upload. And let's see what we have. This is a perfect timing normally for me to ask if anyone out there in the audience has questions. Please feel free to type them into the webinar. But as I mentioned earlier, due to the botched recording, no one is there right now to ask me questions. But I do remember the questions from earlier, and so I'm going to try to address them when I have a chance. So now I have in here a single vector, and it's set to cut. And of course, I could change this to score instead of cut or engrave, you know, whatever it is that I want. And it's going to change the colors here. But the best part is that it came in perfectly, right? So I want to stress that if you want to send a vector from Fusion 360 into the Glowforge app, one of the best ways to do it, again, I'll show you, is we're going to go into Fusion. We're going to right-click on a sketch. We're going to say Save as DXF. We're going to open that DXF in Illustrator or Inkscape or whatever, save it as an SVG, and then take that SVG and bring that straight into the Glowforge app. That'll work no problem. Now, if you do have multiple layers, right, like you could end up sketching multiple things, unfortunately, you're going to have to save each one as a separate DXF and then bring them all into Illustrator and set them to different colors. So I'll give you an example of that. We're going to come in here and we're going to make our first sketch. And this first sketch is going to be a simple rectangle. Perfect. And I'm going to stop sketch. Then I'm going to make another sketch. And I'm going to say create a new sketch, same plane. And we're going to make another rectangle. Something like this. Perfect. Then we're going to do a third one. And this time we're going to do all right, so let's say I'm ready. I want to send all of these to the Glowforge app. Maybe I want the outside one to be a cut. Maybe I want this to be a score. And maybe I want this to be an engrave, right? 3 different options. So let's work out how that's going to have to happen. We're going to right-click and say Save as DXF. I'm going to save this one as 1. .dxf. I'm going to right-click on this and say Save as DXF. Choose 2. I'm going to right-click on this. Save as DXF, and I'm going to choose 3. Perfect. Now I'm going to go over to the Illustrator, and I'm going to get rid of this file. We don't need that for now. And then I'm going to go and open up 1.dxf over here.
When we start to get into it, I know.
Again, make sure that I'm in millimeters. 1. Perfect. I'm going to go back to my folder, and I'm going to drag in number 2.
Perfect.
Perfect.
We're here to ask.
Say okay. I'm going to go back and last time here.
It's really for you. So this time
Oh, try again. Almost. There we go. Perfect. So the key here really, and this is kind of annoying, but basically I'm going to have to take this entire thing, hit copy, go to the first file, hit paste, then go to the second one, select everything, hit copy, come in here and select paste. Now I have all three of these things in the same place. I am noticing a problem right off the bat that I didn't notice before, that basically everything is actually centering automatically. Is that the case? And right off the bat, I'm going to tell you that everything is centering automatically, and I don't like that, right? Because what I was really trying to do is this shape. So I'm going to, on the fly, think of another way around it, okay? So I'm making this up as I go along. This might not be perfect, but I think this is actually going to work great. We're going to make a final sketch. It's going to be our fourth sketch, and we're going to do this differently. This time, I'm going to create sketch, and instead of drawing something new, I'm going to use something called project geometry. I'm going to say sketch, project, and I'm going to choose this guy right here. Now I'm going to have to go, and this is kind of annoying that I think I'm going to have to go and select these one at a time. But basically, I'm going to select each of these entities one at a time, and you're going to see that everything that I select is going to turn pink. Perfect. And I'm going to say OK. The result, if I hide the first sketches, is I have one sketch that has everything in it that I wanted, and everything is pink now, and the reason it's pink is simply telling us that this is projected geometry. So this time, I'm going to right-click on this sketch and say Save as DXF. I'm going to name this one as 4.dxf. I'm going to go back into Illustrator, open my folder, and I'm going to open up 4.dxf. And again, we're going to fix our scale. 1. Perfect. Now this is exactly what I did want. Perfect. So that's a workaround I wasn't anticipating showing today, but that will definitely work. So again, if you have multiple sketches and you want to send them all, and you send them as a DXF, it is unfortunately going to center everything, which means that the relative position is going to change. So your best bet is actually to have a single sketch that does everything. Now, you could just draw everything in a single sketch and be done with it, right? But if for whatever reason you have to draw them as separate sketches, you can make one final sketch and project, that's the fancy word here, all of the previous sketch entities from wherever they were drawn into this final sketch and save that final sketch as a DXF, which comes into Illustrator no problem. And then from here, I can say File, Save As, choose SVG. Now, by the way, SVG as an output for Illustrator can be found in both the File, Save As, I'll do that again, File, Save As, and you can see it right here, SVG. You can also go under File, Export, Export As, and I believe you'll find it right here. Perfect. So SVG is in both locations, but DXF is only in the export area. All right. So now that we have this, it's going to be called 4.svg. I'm going to hit OK. I'm going to hit OK again. Now we'll go back to the Glowforge web app. We're going to make a new file here and upload that. We're going to choose 4.svg, and I believe we're going to have exactly what we want in the Glowforge web app. Hold on just a moment. Take another water break. I'm talking a lot here. I hope you guys are enjoying this. All right, perfect. So now we have everything from before. The only catch here, I'll admit, oh, sorry, I messed with the scale here, is that all of the geometry that I created and saved to the DXF all came as a single layer, basically, so that it assumes here in the Glowforge app that I want to cut all of this, or I want to score all of this, or I want to engrave all of this. It's not letting me separate out that I want to cut the outside and I want to score the inside and I want to, raster the inside or whatever. And that's where the combination of Fusion 360 and Illustrator and CorelDRAW and Inkscape comes in handy. And so let's go back to Illustrator. Now I'm going to choose different colors for each of these things. So let's take a look here. By the way, I'm noticing that these entities are not connected to one another. So I'm going to hold shift and I'm going to select everything on this rectangle. Perfect. Let's see, I got 1, 2, 3, I'm missing something. 4, there we go. And I could say object path join. And it gave me an error. Let's try that again. Actually, I'm going to take this circle and I'm going to hide it. And then I'm going to pick this square. I'm going to highlight the whole thing and try it this time. Object path join. Perfect. And I can take this outside and I can do the same thing there too. Actually, I'm going to take this square. Let's get rid of that square. I'm going to select this whole thing. There we go. And I can say object path join. Perfect. This just cleans up on my end that I now have only 3 things in total. I have the circle, I have the inner box that I can turn on or off, and I have the outer box that I can turn on or off. In truth, this will work even if you don't join the path altogether. It's fine. It'll work. But if you want to, it'll work for the score and for the cut. Actually, for the web interface for Glowforge, it'll work no matter what. But honestly, it's a much better practice to join all those paths. And I think you'll have a lot more control over the end result. And so I'd encourage you to just join all the paths. I think that's the way to go. So let's take this circle, and let's say the circle, we're going to end up doing a raster. So I'm going to say I want to fill this in black, and then I'm going to not have a stroke. And if you're not familiar with fill and stroke, basically, I'm going to zoom in and we'll see that in detail right over here. We can actually, for any of our objects, we can fill with a certain color, and a stroke is like a highlight around the outer edge. So right now it's a fill with black, and let's pick, let's see here, where are all my colors? Really? That's annoying. I'm going to pick a gray to make this. Oh, there we go. That's what we're doing. So I have my color, and I'm going to pick, let's say, this pink over here to make a stroke, and I'm going to set it here. Let's try one last time. I messed that all up. I'm going to hold shift and click here, pick somewhere in the gray, then I pick a color, and then I finally pick a color, as crazy as that was. And now what you can see here is that this circle has a black fill and a red stroke. And typically with vectors for laser cutting, the fill is going to be like a raster. I believe in the Fusion side we call it engraved. Let's do a double check here. Yeah, in Glowforge we call a raster engraved. And so I'm going to go back here and fill this in black, and I'm going to get rid of the stroke. I don't even need the stroke here. And then I'm going to take this particular rectangle. We want this one to be a score. I'm going to choose this one to be, again, I'm going to hold shift, pick a color. We're going to set this to like green or something. And it doesn't really matter what the colors are that you pick, as long as everything is a different color. And then I'm going to come over here and pick for this guy another color, and we're going to go with yellow or something. That's really nice. Perfect. I'm going to save this as my SVG. I'm going to call this 5 for now. And let's take a look at what that's going to be like on the, oh, hold on, I did okay first. Let's take a look at what that's going to look like on the Glowforge interface. So I'm going to come in here and import 5.svg, and I believe we're going to see 3 different tabs. And we could set, one of them is going to be for the inner circle, one's going to be for the inner square. Yes, inner circle, we want an engrave. That's right. That's a raster. The bigger square, we're going to turn this into a proof grade cut, and then this one's going to be a proof grade score. Perfect. And so you can easily set all of that right here in Fusion, actually, not in Fusion, right here in the Glowforge interface, and I actually set that up. The key is that I changed the colors in Illustrator before I sent it over. So the workflow was start in Fusion 360 in a single sketch, save it as a DXF, open that DXF in Illustrator, choose to combine as many paths as you can together, and then color each of those paths that you want a different operation for, color them all separately, and then save that whole thing as an SVG, which can go over to the Glowforge. All right. One note of warning that I found out the hard way, and then also was taught by the Glowforge community. If you want to set, let's say, this circle to be both a engrave or raster in the center and a score on the outside, if you select a color for the score as well, it doesn't matter what you pick, but the Glowforge app is not going to be able to determine that this is two different things in one. So if you really want this to be two different things, what you should do is set one of them to be a fill only. Like let's say this thing, we're going to do a fill only. Then I'm going to copy this thing by duplicating it. And then I'm going to take the second one and I'm going to set that to a stroke. Same like before. And I'm going to get rid of the fill. Perfect. So visually, this looks kind of like before, right? It looks like a fill and a stroke all together, but you're actually seeing that as two different things here, which means that when I bring it into the Glowforge, I'm going to see it as two different things.
Oh, nice.
Now, I would love if Glowforge is listening to work on that for us so that I can pick a fill and a stroke in one object, bring it over to the Glowforge, and it'll automatically discern that I want to do two things to it. You know, maybe an engrave/raster and a score. I would love it if you guys would do that. But in the meantime, I hope everyone realizes that you have to duplicate your object and make one a score and one a stroke and one a fill, or both fills of different colors, or both strokes of different colors, and the Glowforge interface will know, as long as the colors are different, that it's two different things. Cool. Need another drink of water, and then we'll continue.
Fusion's this hybrid cloud tool.
All right. It's a lot of talking here. Okay, so next thing I want to do is show you guys how you can, the third way, you're going to go from the Fusion 360 interface to the Glowforge. All right. Let's say I have a 3D object. So I'm going to take this thing, and maybe I'm going to go like this, and I have a 3D object. You know, let's actually bring up something more interesting than that. Let's go into my laser cutting folder and let's pick something awesome. This is going to be a little bit of a preview to next week. Next week, we're going to go over this particular file in detail and see how it was made. If you guys want to see what it is, you'll get to see a little bit of a preview right now. Excellent. This is a 3D antelope. And it's drawn by Chad Lockhart, who's an industrial designer and also technical specialist for Fusion 360 here at Autodesk. He and I work together, and I love his design skills. So he drew this up just for us for this particular webinar, and you can see that it's designed as multiple layers that are all laser cut. We'll go over that a little bit later. But the cool thing is that once you have something that's 3D, you can use a different way to actually be able to make this into an SVG. So I don't know if any of you guys noticed this, but up here, I have an icon that's not normally here in Fusion, and it says Export to Shaper. So before I actually show you what it does, I want to show you how to get it. So the thing you're going to do is you're going to go to Add-ins, Fusion 360 App Store, and you're going to search for Shaper, and you're going to find this utility right here. You're going to download it for whatever operating system you want. Perfect. And then once you download it, you're going to double click on it and install it onto your computer. I have to sign in, of course, first. And once you install it, in Fusion 360, you're going to have this icon. So here's the question is, what does this actually do? Well, the cool thing is, you know, earlier we showed you how to take a sketch and save that sketch out, but sometimes you already have 3D geometry, and maybe you actually messed with the 3D geometry outside of the sketch, and the sketch itself is no longer accurate. So another way to do that would be to take this Shaper Origin plugin, choose the input type, when we have a lot of options here, one of which is faces. And I could choose any of these flat faces. Let's say I pick this one right here, this small one, and I say OK. It's going to bring up a dialog box where I get to choose where I want to save this SVG. And I'm going to call this one layer 4 left.svg, and hit OK. Let's bring that into Illustrator and see what it would look like. We're going to come in, where's my folder? There we are. We're going to look for layer 4 left and bring that in Illustrator. And it looks like it's exactly that layer that we saw on the antelope, right? So if I go back to the antelope, you can see it's this guy right here. I could do the same thing with any one of these, right? And it doesn't matter if there's a sketch that created this or not. That's really the key, is you don't always have a sketch available. You can come in here and say, I want to choose, and by the way, if you do have a sketch, you can still output one, right? So if I go back, let's go back to our closet divider that we had before. I can still come in here and use the Shaper Origin tool choose a sketch and choose this sketch and say OK, and it's going to give me master sketch.svg. Again, I can come in here to Illustrator and come in, take master sketch and bring it in, and it's going to look just like my closet divider. But the cool thing is that you have additional abilities to actually grab faces. So like on this antelope, I could again say shaper. I want to choose this face, and maybe I want this one over here. And say OK. And then now it's going to be layer 3 left. I'm going to go back into Illustrator. And this time we're going to bring layer 3 right here in Fusion. Perfect. And so this is a really easy way for you to actually go and create that SVG. Now, by the way, because the shaper utility is making it into an SVG, if you don't need to separate things out into multiple layers to choose which one's going to be cut, which one's going to be engraved, and which one's going to be scored, you can go straight to the Glowforge interface. Let's go take a look at that. So I'm going to come in here and create a new file again. I'm going to choose the left layer 4. That is, now we're going to do layer 3. It's nice and big. We're going to say open, and we're going to see what we got.
And you share that URL with someone. So if you send this to your customer,
rendering our design, crossing my fingers, of course, and there we are. I have my design right here. And based on the profiles that it has here, it's letting me choose it actually is separating a little bit of this out. And in this case, I'm going to choose, I want to convert that to a cut, and this is also going to be a cut, and now everything's great. Cool, and so I can go and laser this right away. Now, of course, I could also scale this and everything else. But the point is, you don't always need Illustrator or Inkscape or Corel, but it's often helpful. And so, at the very least, it might be quicker for you to preview whether or not the shape itself exported correctly. Right? But going back to Fusion, again, it's the Shaper Origin utility. It was designed for the Shaper Origin, which is a handheld CNC machine, but that machine happens to require SVGs just like the Glowforge, and so this particular application is going to export the selected geometry as an SVG that you can use either in the Glowforge app or in Illustrator and clean up, and then send to the Glowforge app. Whatever it is you'd like, it's pretty darn handy. And it's also handy, by the way, if you ever have 3D geometry that actually you rotated relative to the direction you sketched it. So let's say, for example, I have in my files right here, I have a little nameplate that I created for my desk. By the way, it looks like, let's see here, looks like this. Cool, Jason Lichtman, Technical Specialist. Makes me really, really official. And so I created this in Fusion and then laser cut it. And if I look at the file in front of me right now, I can see that when I created this thing, I created this as a sketch in this front view, but then I ended up rotating everything slightly so that this thing, sits at a slight angle. And so if I saved out the SVG right now from the sketch, the result is going to be a little different, right? Because the sketch doesn't really align with the real part at this point. And so again, I can come in here under Shaper Origin, choose I want to output this particular face, and then I could choose this face without any problem. I could even pick multiple faces. That's pretty darn amazing. Say OK. And then it's going to create nameplate.svg. And if we want to go and preview that, let's go straight to the Glowforge and see what we get. I can come in here and say upload. I believe there was this nameplate.svg. Rendering our design. Perfect. So this is coming in a little upside down. I can actually come in here and rotate it. There we are. And then it's saying that I want to do, right now it thinks it wants to cut the name and engrave the rest. It's probably the opposite. I probably want to cut the rest and then maybe do score or engrave on the text. Right? And it did come in a little bit funny, right? Like the, oh, I scaled funny there. Let's try it again. The A, O, and the A over here came in funny because those are what they call internal loops. And so that is coming a little funny. So this is a perfect example of where I definitely want to clean it up in Illustrator before I actually go and send it to Glowforge. So let's actually go and do that. I'm going to bring in Illustrator. I'm going to come in here and bring in the nameplate. Nice. And it looks like under layers, I have a whole lot of stuff here. If I take this one and I hide it temporarily,
basically, I love this.
Actually, it looks like I don't have anything for the middle of the O or anything else. So this file right now, at least, is not going to be a good example of being able to clean it up. But I would, in general, clean it up in Illustrator, save it as another SVG, and then bring that into Fusion. Sorry, into Glowforge to be able to choose, you know, what I want cut and what I want scored. I hope that makes a lot of sense. All right, cool. So that was a lot. Let's talk about what we just did. There were 3 ways that we can export vectors from Fusion into Glowforge or into Illustrator. The first one was using the CAM functionality. That was here under Model, CAM. And again, you know, that's really meant for CNC machining, although it can do laser cutting, water jet, and plasma. I don't, for Glowforge users, recommend that at all. It's way more complicated. It also had an issue that came up today with a curve. So the vector work is not exactly line to line. And in just general, it's like cumbersome, and I don't see much of an advantage for the Glowforge in particular. The second option was save as DXF, and overall, I really liked it. It is really quick and easy. It will not go straight to the Glowforge app. I do have to bring it into Illustrator and save it as an SVG. Also, there was an issue where if I have 3 different sketches and they're all different shapes and sizes, it doesn't automatically use the same coordinate system for all of them. It actually centers all 3 of those DXFs. And so I didn't really love that. And what I will tell you that you should do then is make sure to either sketch everything as a single sketch or create them as separate sketches and then make one final sketch at the end that combines everything. Take that sketch, save it as a DXF, bring it into Illustrator, separate it out into different layers of different colors if you'd like to have one thing be cut, one thing be scored, and one other thing to be engraved. Copy your layers if you need an individual thing to be like scored and engraved. Copy that, make one scored and one engraved, and so on. And then send that to the Glowforge. And then lastly, we talked about the shaper utility. That's this one right over here. By the way, I am working on having someone make a copy of this that'll maybe even be called the Glowforge add-in. That'll do the same thing. It'll really just save it as an SVG and have a really cool Glowforge icon, or at the very least, just have a like save as a SVG icon. Because in this case, we're not using anything related to the shaper itself. So I think that's a really good utility for 3D geometry and getting that over to Illustrator or Inkscape or whatever, so you can get it to the Glowforge app. Now, let's see. We're at about an hour right now, but there was one more topic that I was hoping to cover. And so if it's all right with you, I'd love to cover it anyway, and hope you guys enjoy the bonus feature of webinar number 2. So the bonus feature is this. Let's actually close all this junk that we don't need anymore and clean everything up for us. Perfect. Okay, so we were talking earlier about this closet hanger, right? We started it last week. We really enjoyed working on it, I hope. I did, at least. And let's make this a little bit more complex, like add a really cool repeating pattern to it. So for me, I like the repeating patterns, but I don't want to necessarily have the whole thing just be one big pattern. I kind of like a little bit more style to it. So let's come in and edit this sketch, and let's add an offset. We're going to go and I choose offset, and I'm going to drag this in and say maybe 3 millimeters would be good. And now it's looking really nice. By the way, one of the most powerful parts of Fusion is the fact that everything that you do in the sketch is parametric. So even though I made an offset of 3 millimeters, if I come in and change the width of this thing to 90, the offset moves as well. If I change this to 200, that's going to move as well. Right? So I can change this, and it's really helpful, because if I did the same thing in Illustrator, let's actually bring that up. We have a bunch of files open here. Let's get rid of most of this crap. That one we don't like, this one we don't need, this one we don't need anymore.
That tells me that we
perfect.
brought it in from SolidWorks.
By the way, I hope you guys are enjoying this. There's a lot more to come. Okay, so I'm going to go and I'm going to take my closet divider, and at this point I don't know which file is which, but I'm going to take this closet divider, and this looks about right. So let's say I select this whole thing. First off, right now, everything is individual, right? Each of these pieces is separate. So I talked about how I highlight the whole thing, and I say path, object, path, join. And now I have a single path for everything. So now I can actually come in here and apply a fill if I'd like.
So you're adding it,
and it fills in perfectly. All right, so this looks right. If I wanted to make a offset, and I say object path offset path, I can preview that, and maybe we're going to make it offset is minus 0.25.
I can also have a wildcard search.
Okay, now this looks a little crazy right now because it applied a stroke to this thing that's like, I think, really thick. But if I take this and I change, oh no, apply to fill. Let's get rid of that. Let's make a stroke. That's maybe this color. Perfect. So it actually made a stroke in both directions. We can go, you didn't see that. Never happened. Let's try again. I'm going to take this particular path, this one on the inside, and I need to get rid of a bunch of this. So it turns out I have to select this entire chunk in the middle and delete it. I'm going to select this entire chunk and delete it, this chunk and delete it, this chunk. Cool. Now this is actually looking like I was expecting. Perfect. So it's my actual part. And let me get rid of this horrible coloring, and then that'll make more sense.
So pretty cool.
So the black outline is going to be my cut, and the blue right now is the offset on the inside. And I made it. It took a couple more steps in Infusion, and that's okay. But here's the part that I don't like in Illustrator. If I pick this entire part and I change the width of it, it sort of changes the inside, but notice that the actual offset is now different in width than it is in height. Like basically it stretches everything weird. And if I select just one thing, like just the outside, and I start making that wider, notice that the inside doesn't go with it. It's not parametric. And I love that in Fusion in particular, I can come in here and I can edit these dimensions however I want, and everything just goes and updates. Love it.
It's going to be no problem.
Cool.
So now if I
let's say for a second, I have everything exactly how I want. I now have this offset, and let's send this over to Illustrator. I'm going to save this as a DXF. This is going to be called closet divider number 3. Cool. And I'm going to go into Illustrator, and let's open that up.
Yeah. So we've got this. We're going to cut out a slot. I'll just hit Q.
Again, I fix my units.
Let's extrude that.
Perfect. And I have the closet divider. I can come in here and delete the center line. I don't need that anymore. Get out of this isolation mode. And now I have my divider. But again, it's made of all these little things. It's not really a proper path. So let's come in here and see if we can clean this up. So it's probably going to be easier to just highlight these one at a time. I go and select this thing, and this thing, and this, and this, and say object, path, join. Cool, now I have one thing, I can hide that. Ah, I missed a section, we'll get back to that. And I'm going to highlight everything besides that line, there we go. And I'm going to say object, path, join. I'm going to hide this, and now I'm going to show, I still have this sliver line, and this one. And I can select both of these together, right, or highlight like that, and say object path join. Perfect. So now I have what I actually wanted. I have a line on the inside, and I have line work on the outside. And let's take this thing and bring it into our Glowforge template. So I'm going to highlight everything, hit Control-C, and now I paste this into my Glowforge template, and this is perfect. Cool. I could even put it in positionally in my bed exactly where I want it. And let's keep going. Let's rename this thing. So this one that I highlighted looks like it's the inside. This one over here that I could turn on and off is the outside. So this is going to be my cut, and this is my inside. Now let's apply a pattern, right? So I went online, and I downloaded a bunch of patterns, and I found one that I liked. It was called, apparently, Arabic Vector Pattern. Right? Name doesn't really matter. I really like the pattern. It looks awesome. So I want to go and bring this into my Glowforge. So into Illustrator, so I can bring it into the Glowforge.
Awesome. So thanks, Tyler.
Okay. So I'm going to turn the label off. I'm going to highlight everything else. And let's see. I'm going to get rid of the swatch. Perfect. And I'm going to take this thing and I'm going to copy it. And I'm going to go into the Glowforge and I'm going to hit paste. And what I'm seeing right off the bat is basically this pattern is not so big. And by big, I don't mean, like physically big, but it's not covering the entire Glowforge. And chances are I'm going to want this thing to be, I want to be able to scale this to like be really detailed like this, right? But if I do that, it doesn't really even cover my entire part. So one of the things I did was I took this pattern and I spent some time and I copied and pasted it and then joined it to the original. I repositioned it perfectly and then rejoined it, and then I copied and pasted and rejoined it. I did that a bunch of times. And once you're done with that, it's going to look like this. Whoa. Right, so let's zoom out. I copied and pasted this a bunch of times. And now I have this thing super detailed and huge. This is, remember that space over here is the Glowforge bed, and this is way bigger than the bed, which means I can take this whole thing and I can scale it down and make it super fine if I really want to, and it's still going to be way bigger than the part that I'm actually cutting, if that makes sense. So I have my pattern. I just undid a bunch of stuff, so now it looks like when I started. And let's apply that to the actual piece. So there are two ways to do this. One is called a clipping mask, and one is basically using what would have been the clipping mask to actually trim the pattern. These are two different approaches. I would say that the clipping mask approach is the more pro-level method, and there are advantages of it. But I will warn you right off the bat right now that in my live demo, in my live webinar earlier, someone asked about this, and so we actually did it live, and we ran into problems. So in short, the Glowforge will not take clipping masks, but I'll actually show you that in just a few minutes. So how does this work? Well, the first thing I want to do is I want to make a new layer here, and I'm going to call this layer background. And I'm going to make copies of pretty much everything that I have here, the outer cut, the inner cut, and this pattern. And I'm going to make a copy of all of this because when I start messing with things, I still want to back up. Cool. So let's hide that, and I'm going to hide the pattern. Again, this is my actual piece. I'm going to zoom in quite a bit here, and I'm going to hide the cut, because really we're going to just want the pattern to be inside of this area here, right? So the first thing I'm going to do is I want to take my pattern, show it again, and I'm going to click on it, and what I'm noticing is basically if I double click on my pattern, each of these things is an individual selectable piece. I can actually move these if I want. But that's helpful in some cases. In this case, it's not so good. We don't want that. So what I'm going to do is, if you've never heard of something called a compound path, basically it takes multiple objects and it forces it into a single layer, into a single object. So I'm going to take my Arabic pattern, select it here in Illustrator, and I'm going to go under Object, Compound Path, Make. Now, when I select this thing, I can't select each individual piece of the pattern. It's only selecting the whole thing together. And that's actually going to be a good thing, because now I can select the pattern, and I can select the path of the, like I want to trim it with, select both over here, and then I could say I want to do an intersect. And what it's going to do is basically only keep the pattern that intersects with the actual path that I used to trim. And that's what this looks like. And that's pretty darn cool. And if I show the cut path that I had on the outside, now you start to see how this can start to look really, really neat fast. Maybe, by the way, I want the cut to be a different color, right? Because I told you that Glowforge is going to interpret things based on color. So now I have green that represents the cut, and black that represents a score or an engrave, whatever I want. And just for sake of argument, let's actually take this, let's save this, and I'm going to save an SVG, and let's bring it into the Glowforge. So I'm saving this, and I'm going to call this A. Glowforge Webinar 2A.svg, save that, hit OK. We'll go back to the Glowforge app, and I'm going to upload, what was it called? Glowforge Webinar 2A.svg. This might take a moment because this is obviously more complex than what we worked on before. But in a moment, you're going to see that I have the perfect ability to be able to cut. Right now, I misinterpreted, right? It thinks I want to cut both. I want the outside to be cut, and I want the inside to be engraved. And now I have something really, really cool. Let's actually pan over here, and this is what it would look like. If I want to change this from engraved to proofgrade score, I could do that too, and it'll just do those outlines. And you can see how you can get really cool patterns here. And it was as simple as taking my DXF from Fusion to Illustrator, Illustrator over to the Glowforge web interface. Now, there is a negative with doing the trim command. So basically, so by the way, I used what was called intersect. I had the path that I was going to use to trim on the above and my, I'm talking funny, it's already been an hour and 15 minutes of talking straight, that's probably why. I had my path for trimming above my path for the pattern. And then I selected both and I chose intersect. And that resulted in this. Now, if I wanted to change like the position of the pattern itself, like let's say I really didn't like how they lined up on the edge here, and I wanted to move the position of the pattern, unfortunately, it's not parametric here like it is in Fusion. And so if I want to do that, I have to actually undo a couple of times until I have my pattern again. Then I'd have to move my pattern over slightly. You can see on my screen, it's probably a little blurry, but I move my pattern over slightly. Then I would select the inside again and say intersect. So again, I have to go and undo a bunch of times and then redo it. And again, if I zoom in here, I'm seeing something weird going on over there. These paths are a little too close. So again, I have to undo, move my pattern.
Directly inside of Fusion. I don't have to leave this environment.
Perfect. And then again, choose the inside and say I want to intersect.
Over from the model workspace.
And I didn't select two things. Let's try that again.
Workspace.
Intersect.
It changes my ribbon bar, and it changes my browser.
Cool. So when I was doing this webinar earlier today, someone asked, what about clipping masks? What about clipping masks? So the first thing I have to do right now is tell you what on earth a clipping mask is. A clipping mask, basically, instead of trimming the actual vectors, it basically trims the visualization of those vectors, but it leaves the original vectors themselves untouched. So if that doesn't make sense to you, I'm just going to show you how it works, and then I think it'll make a lot more sense.
I can always get back.
So in this case right now, my actual vectors are trimmed. If I click on the outside of my, what did I do?
Okay.
This is where I was. If I click on the outside of my shape of my closet divider, I'm not going to actually be able to select on the pattern itself because the pattern itself is completely trimmed permanently. Besides being able to use the undo button, you know, the pattern itself is gone. But if I come in here, I'm going to delete that particular thing. I'm going to go into my backup folder. This is why backups are so awesome. And what did we call this one? That one's the cut. This is what I wanted. So I'm going to say, let's take these things and duplicate them.
I want to be able to cut that part with 3-axis machine.
And let's move them over.
The first thing we want to do is work from left.
All right, so I'm going to hide my backup again. I just like before, I have my actual pattern. I still have to, let me go back a step. There we go. I have to take my pattern and I have to turn it into a compound path again. No big deal. And this time, here's where it's going to get cool. I'm going to select the inside cutter, and I'm going to select the pattern. And this time, I'm going to go to Object, Clipping Mask, Make. Now, the result visually looks just like it did before. I mean, really, the only difference is when I was doing it before, this particular shape ended up looking like, let's see here. It ended up looking, instead of having a fill, it had a stroke. So it looked like this. Hold on, let's get rid of there. There we go. So this is exactly what it looked like before. But the difference is, if you've noticed a second ago, when I click on this, or even when I highlight over it, you see how the entire pattern is showing in the background? That's saying that I didn't really trim the pattern. I'm just trimming what I'm showing of the pattern. What that means to you is that if I come in here and I select this pattern, I could actually, ooh, I selected that wrong. Let me do that again.
Now I want to do is
I can select just the pattern itself, just like this, and I can move this pattern, and whenever I let go, the pattern itself is going to update inside my actual closet divider. All right. So the reason this is helpful is basically it allows you to iterate all different kinds of cool designs really, really fast. and modify them really easily and do it in a way that's actually easily updatable, right? Because every time I move this, the pattern's actually changing over here, and that's awesome. But here's my warning to you. Unfortunately, Glowforge does not yet accept clipping masks, and as a result, let's save this out and see what we're going to get. I'm going to say File, Save As, and this time we're going to call it 2b.svg. Hit OK. I'm going to go back to our Glowforge app, and we're going to upload a new design. This time it is 2b. And we're going to get an error. A big, huge error. Not going to work at all.
You can choose the solid model.
I'll show you the error in just a second when it finishes rendering. Again, remember, this is a pretty detailed design. I mean, you know, relative to a couple of squares and circles. And so, hold on a second.
I want to make sure
this is crazy. So this is showing me the entire pattern. It basically did not automatically clip it the way that it clipped in Fusion, and that's a problem. In fact, even worse than that, this, generally speaking, you know, if you set this to engrave or whatever, this would be a disaster. This is going to try to engrave a big chunk of your bed that you're not going to want engraved for no reason because there's nothing there, or it's going to ruin your workpiece that you were trying to save for actual useful stuff. You really only wanted to engrave this closet divider. You didn't want to engrave the entire workpiece, and so this is not going to work for you, at least for the time being. On a positive note, hardware is what's really fixed. It's the software that can be updated really easily, and so Dan and the Glowforge team, if you could please fix two things that we talked about today. Number one, I would love it if you would fix, so if I take an object and make a fill and a stroke, that the Glowforge web interface will know that I want to do two different operations to the same object. That would be amazing. Right, so it had two different things on the left instead of one. And then the second is I would love it if you could make it so clipping masks work. Oh, and lastly, I would love it if you could just take DXF files so I didn't have to convert so much in Illustrator. That would be amazing. Those are my 3 requests for now. So for you guys, the rest of you that don't work at Glowforge, know that clipping masks are not going to work for you. So what you should be doing in Illustrator is actually trimming your pattern and then only uploading basically the trimmed pattern, and that will work just fine. We just covered in the last hour and 20 minutes a whole lot of stuff. All right, let's go look at what we covered.
Change it by dimension.
Come on, PowerPoint.
Now, that's one way I can do it. I suggest you guys.
There we go. We covered the 4 different ways you can import vectors into Fusion. My favorite, again, being insert SVG. I think that really is the best. Then in terms of exporting, we talked about 3 different ways to export from Fusion. My favorite of the bunch is definitely going to be to right-click and say Save as DXF. And then if I have to, well, I definitely have to convert it in Illustrator to an SVG, potentially with cleanup beforehand. I also do like the Shaper Origin utility. Again, that's going to give me SVGs. In theory, that one will go straight to the Glowforge, but I still recommend cleaning it up in Illustrator. That would, I think, would be the best way to do it. And then we went over applying a pattern within Illustrator to objects that were created in Fusion, and we showed 2 different methods. One is to trim the pattern using a path that was created, and the second thing we did was to use a clipping mask using a path that was created. In either case, visually looks almost identical. The clipping path allows you a little bit more versatility and being able to move the pattern around until you line it up exactly how you want it. But ultimately, the clipping mask is not going to work for Glowforge. You really do need to trim the pattern yourself. All right, that was a lot. So what is next, right? This is webinar number 2 out of 6 that I committed to making for the Glowforge community. So let's look at what's on the agenda for the day after tomorrow. On Wednesday, oh, that's not the right thing at all. There we go. On Wednesday, November 22nd, from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. Mountain Standard Time, we are going to go back into our roots of sketching, because sketching is that important to designing 3D objects. And we're going to show how to take a sketch like this antelope right here. It's called the Laser Antelope by Chad Lockhart, and how to turn it into a 3D thing like you see right over here. And then we're also going to show how to take each of those layers and save those out to the Glowforge. And then on our fourth webinar, which the date and time has not been scheduled yet, for our fourth webinar, we're going to go over taking a solid object, a solid 3D model, whether you download it or create it yourself, and show how to slice that into layers, which you could then laser cut. So think of in the original Glowforge video, the one that convinced you to buy the Glowforge, I imagine, you saw there was a 3D globe with all the continents on it, and then it was sliced into different layers. We're going to do exactly that for this particular antelope, also designed by our industrial designer friend Chad Lockhart. And we're going to show how to slice that into a slicer for Fusion 360 to be able to bring that over to the Glowforge. This has been an absolutely incredible hour and 25 minutes. I hope you guys enjoy. If you have questions or comments, please let me know. I can be reached at jason.lichtman@autodesk.com. It's spelled Jason, the N like Nancy, .Lichtman, Lichtman like man at the end, Lichtman at autodesk.com. Please feel free to send your comments, suggestions. If you have things you'd like to cover on future webinars, please let me know, because so far I still have 2 webinars without an exact curriculum figured out. So please let me know what you would like to see, and I'm happy to show it. Clearly, it could be on the Fusion 360 side, the Illustrator side, or even the combine the two together side of things. I am getting my I'm getting my Glowforge itself on Wednesday, and I'm a very, very excited person to be able to play with it all weekend. So happy early Thanksgiving to all of you. Hope you have a wonderful day, and thank you for watching. Bye, guys.
That I want to make a change. So I'm going to close out of the simulation.